Welcome to the podcast of Liderando con Liz, a place where we focus on leading with a human touch. And because of that, we have Steven Garavito with us here today, one of my dearest friends. And let me give you an overview of Steven's academic and professional background. He's a finance professional with an emphasis on leadership and management. We had the opportunity to work together at Amazon, but his experience spans over 9 years working in companies such as Amazon and others. Also, he's here with us today because he shares my passion for leadership and supporting others in their growth path. And he's here today as well to share some tips about personal finances. Thank you so much for being here, Stephen.
Hi, Liz. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me over. I want to share all of my experience, all of my knowledge that I have on my personal life about personal finances. So here we go.
Thank you. All right, Stephen, I have a lot of questions for you today that I think are going to be very important for our audience and also very helpful. So let me start with the first one. What's one piece of financial advice you wish everyone learned in a school but often don't?
So there's a really interesting quote by Albert Einstein that I think will summarize that learning that I wanted to have back
Okay.
then. And it says, compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world.
Okay.
He who understands it earns it. He who doesn't pays it.
Okay.
So I wish I could have someone back there who taught me actually this, who showed me with real life examples what happened if I took a loan for 5, 10, or 20 years, or what actually happened if I did the opposite and I did investment for 5, 10, or 20 years.
Thank you so much for that message, Stephen. And I think it's going to be very useful for all of our audience. And that brings me to my next question. What role does mindset play in achieving financial stability and success?
Thank you, Liz. So I think mindset is everything here. How people think about money, it will determine if they will thrive or struggle in their personal finances.
Okay.
So it's actually whether they'll spend more or invest more money, if they are going to take responsibility over their budget or just blame external circumstances. I want to leave some of the mindsets that we can work on to change like this perception over money. One of them is you have to say to yourself, I can learn this. You
Okay.
have to say, this is not science from outer space. This is something that you can actually learn in different ways. And if you take that time to learn about personal finances, it will be easier to understand and work on them each day. The second one is small steps matter. So probably different to different aspects in life. Small steps matter here, and
Mhm.
it's something that you're going to work on a daily basis. And it's actually something that you can't work on a big step. It's something that
Yeah.
you have to create a habit to do so. The other one is money is a tool. Money is not the goal. So if you keep thinking that money is the goal, you will never get there. You have to think just how to use money in your behalf. And the other one is I'm responsible for this. I'm responsible for my money, for my expenses. And if you take that responsibility over your finances, over
Mhm.
your goals, you're gonna do a more strategic planning, a more
Mhm.
um, long-term goals rather than just spending your money away.
Oh, that's so nice. And I have been making a lot of emphasis on people keeping themselves curious and learning. And I think this is a great example of how to change your mentality to that and always take steps to improve yourself in every aspect, and especially the financial aspect that is very important. Thank
So
you.
just to summarize that, there's a quote. It's not by someone, but I think it's the perfect summary for this section, and I'm gonna read it out for all of you. So it's not just about how much you earn; it's about how you think. It's about intention. Even with little money, good habits and good will build resilience, and your mindset is the engine behind every financial decision in your life.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. And I think, again, it's going to be very helpful to everybody out there listening because they need to change their mindset to be able to manage their money better. This conversation is very, very interesting. And that brings me also to another question that is very relevant, especially for me, because I have gone through that. And it is, what's the difference between saving and investing? And how should someone decide where to put their money first?
It's a really good question, Liz. And let me start with the definition of savings. So,
Okay.
per definition, saving says is just separating an amount of money
Mhm.
and keep it somewhere at a very low interest rate
Okay.
for short-term goals and a very low risk. And for me, that's not the situation nowadays. And I think times and technology has changed a lot. And
Okay.
all of us should be investing today instead of just saving money. So some of you or all of you may be familiar with the concept of inflation in the countries. So let's say a good example for Colombia, inflation for the last year was about 10%. So if you save your money with no interest rate for 1 year, you're not saving your money at all. You're just losing value over your money for 1 year,
Okay.
and the next year it will be 10% less versus the previous year. So investing is very easy today. There's a lot of new banks, of digital banks, of app-based banks, which allow you and has changed this throughout time. So they're challenging the usual banking. They're offering a higher interest rate for savings.
Mm-hmm.
So usually in most of the countries where these banks are coming up, they are offering an interest rate on your savings, let's say at least between a 3 to 5%,
Right.
versus a regular one that was offering less than 1%, 0.23%.
Right.
So having at least that 3 to 5% will allow you to, in 1 year, to compensate the inflation that you have. So you are saving your money, you are keeping the value of the money over time, and you're probably making some earnings throughout the year for that amount of money that you have. So throughout the rest of our conversation, we're talking about investing instead of saving. I think with these apps, with these digital banks, there's no reason today to not be investing money. The
Okay.
best way to do it in a safe way, because it doesn't represent any risk for you or for anyone. You can just keep your money here, receive that high return for your money in a safe way. And just I want to make a quick parenthesis here. Just make sure that those banks are in each one of the countries
Mm-hmm.
are complying with the regulatory part in each one of the countries.
Very
So there are
important.
a lot of new international banks that may be offering services at your country, but are not compliant with your country regulations. So just make sure if you're gonna do this, make sure it's compliant with all of the regulations and properly registered in each one of the countries.
Okay. Thank you so much. And is there any suggestions that you can make in terms of banks that offer those kind of options and that comply with those regulations?
I think we have a lot of an audience from different countries today, so probably I don't think there's a bank yet that it's in all of the countries, but
Okay.
for sure, if you look for those trends within your country, you can find a couple of banks or digital banks or app-based platforms that are growing in the last 2 or 3 years, but just make sure to read about them and again to make sure that they're compliant with the regulations in your country, and then you can spend some money here. I think this is the first step, and probably in the future, once you have a little bit more of understanding on how those personal finances and those investment work, you can look for some other options like probably investing in portfolios, in ETFs, in fixed term savings, which will allow you to probably get a little bit more of interest rate through the time, or even at a higher risk for the money that you have.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. Those are great options. And like you said, it's not just saving your money, but it's actually making you earnings for your money. So that's wonderful. There you have it, people. Several options, but please be smart when you're investing your money. This conversation actually keeps getting better and better. And with the next question, I think you're going to give some great advice for very young people. So let me go to the question. What are the most common financial mistakes people make in their 20s and 30s, and how can they avoid them?
Perfect. So let's divide this in two sections: people in their 20s and
Hmm.
people in their 30s. So for people in the 20s, I think it's four main things. The
Okay.
first one is, I think it's the first one and the biggest one, is not taking advantage of time today. It's not investing early and not investing for your retirement. So you have to allow time to work for you together with compound interest. Let's make a quick example, and let's say you're going to start saving $1 when you're 20 years old for
Okay.
40 years. If you do, if you save this money with no interest rate, just under your bed, and that's it, in 40 years you will have somewhere around less than $20,000. So you will probably say to yourself, saving $1 for just having less than $20,000 in 40 years is not very that much. But if you invest today in these apps we were talking about, which can be offering somewhere around 10% of annual rate today, so at 10% annual rate for 40 years, $1 per day, you can end up with $160,000
Wow.
in 40 years, which is
Mhm.
a pretty good amount of money when
It
you're getting to
is.
your retirement. So just take advantage of your time, of time itself, take advantage of compound interest and start doing it today. Don't wait anymore.
Great.
The second one, it's lifestyle. And I think the message here it's pretty short. Is just don't live to impress others.
Very
People spend a
important.
lot of money in lifestyle, in trying to impress other people, in things that probably you really don't need at the moment.
Hmm.
So stop wasting money on lifestyle unless you really need it for yourself. Of course you can you want to spend money you're working
Right.
on yourself, but be cautious about how you're spending this money. The other one is probably not start working and having an emergency fund today. So you want to aim to have at least 2 months of living expenses in the
Mhm.
short midterm. Probably you don't need it today because probably if you're in your 20s, you're still living with roommates, you're still probably receiving some support from your parents, you're probably still living at your parents' house. So you don't need it today, but again, it's some emergency fund that you have to work on and start doing today.
Mhm.
So we can aim to have those 2 months. So when you really need it, you're going to have that money.
Yeah.
And if you're investing, you're going to already have this emergency fund. You don't have to probably do different investments to get your emergency fund to have your investment, but you can take advantage of these digital banks or of these apps that now they do have some things called like wallets or pockets. So if you have
Okay.
seen within the app, you can separate your money.
Mhm.
So if you're investing and using these apps, you can just have two different funds. Just save the amount of money that you want to save on a monthly basis. And once in the app, just separating these two buckets, like the
Okay.
emergency fund, which is not going to be probably that much, and the rest goes into the investment part. And the
Wonderful.
fourth one, it's not spending time on your education, on your financial education. So you're still young, you want to start learning about this and don't make the same mistakes we have all done or probably parents have done. So start investing in that education today. And you don't have to spend a lot of money, probably you have to spend money at all, just spending some time and investing some of your time in this. It's really easy to do it nowadays. Some of these digital banks have some blogs, have some education platforms that you can use. You can watch this type of podcasts and videos. You can follow different accounts in Instagram and TikTok that are dedicated to personal finances. So these are the four things in the 20s.
Great. And a question comes to mind when you said something that really resonated with me: education, educating yourself in terms of finances, because I think it's key, and probably in your process, it was key for you to get this good at personal finances. So, what is that? Maybe a podcast or a book, or maybe a role model that you have for this topic in specific that you can recommend to our audience.
I think for me, I have done a lot of mistakes as well,
Mhm.
despite my financial background. But I there's a very famous book that it just gave me like that first insight into personal finances, which was Rich Dad Poor Dad. It's a really really good book, which is very good to start. And uh, here in Colombia, I'm just following an Instagram account. Which is called Price IT Call, which
Okay.
gives those small um, tips on your personal finances. Um, it's probably something not that I don't know, but I don't take the time to investigate. So, for example, what this guy does is that he uh, goes into the supermarkets and kinds of compare the prices of different supermarkets. So they're
Oh.
doing the work for you, and you can just go and just see the video and know which place is cheaper for you to go to make the your grocery stores.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. There you have it, people. You know, you have a book suggestion and also an Instagram account suggestion that we will also leave in the comments for you to go and see if it works for you as well. Okay, now let's dive into the advice for your 30s.
Perfect. So for 30s, it's not that if you're in your 20s, you're not making these mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
You may be starting to get into some of these topics. So again, first one, not to invest. So if you haven't done it in your 20s, it doesn't mean that you're late for doing it. But
Mm-hmm.
again, even if you're in your 40s, in your 50s, start doing it today and start allowing time to work in your behalf. So let's use the same example. Let's say you didn't do it in your 20s, you're going to start when you're 30 years old and you will invest $1 for the next 30 years instead of the 40 at the same 10% of annual rate. So you're not going to get to $160,000, but you're going to get somewhere around $60,000. So it's still a lot of money that you're going to have at the end of those 30 years if you
Mm-hmm.
allow time and compound interest to work in your behalf. And probably if you're in your 30s, you're probably in a better position to invest more than $1 per day.
Yeah,
So you can still invest a little bit more and still get to the same goal that you wanted to get before.
sure.
The second one, and I think it's where all of us struggle the most, is credit cards and loans.
True.
So I'm going to try to dive deeper into credit cards. So the first one is um not understanding again compound interest in the credit cards. So don't use credit cards for lifestyle again.
Okay.
And let's use a very common example. Let's say you want to buy the latest iPhone that it's now in the market or the latest Samsung and you want to spend, let's say, around $800 for this cell phone. So you're going to get into a debt either with a credit card,
True.
and let's say you're going to buy it for in 5 years. You're going to pay the debt in 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
So that's 72 months of interest of compound interest working against you. You're not now investing. You are now having compound interest working against you.
Mm-hmm.
And while you're able to get in savings and interest at 10% annual rate for your saving, for credit cards, it may be somewhere between in Latin America, in Middle East, in Asia, interest rates are somewhere between the 22% up to 450%.
Wow.
So let's assume the best case scenario, which is 22%
Mm-hmm.
in 5 years for the $800, you're going to end up paying almost twice the price of that phone. So you need to ask yourself before doing that purchase if you really need that phone just for lifestyle, or if it's actually for your work, it may be worth it.
Yeah.
Otherwise,
True.
it's not worth it to end up paying almost twice for the same phone that in 5 years you're going to be looking forward to buy a new one
Yeah.
and you may be ending up in the same situation. So if you don't need the phone right now, if you don't need the latest technology, you can just buy probably one for around $400, which may have several functions, similar functions. And if you're in a very tight budget, just aim to probably $200. $200, you can get a very good phone, which has a lot of things, and you're not
Yeah.
going to get into debt and the fight of compound interest. The second one is not knowing the interest rate you're paying for. So
They're
if you
important.
have credit cards today, just after we finish talking today, after you finish seeing this video, just take your bank statement and start analyzing this. So understand how much is the rate you're paying in your credit cards. Again, it can be somewhere between 22% to 450%.
Wow.
which it's a lot of money even if it's 22%.
Uh-huh.
So understand first what's your annual interest rate you're paying in your credit card. Second one, understand how much you're paying in that interest. When you usually use credit cards and loans in some of the banks, it can be tricky because what they do is that they charge you for the interest first before actually allowing you to pay your debt. So what does this mean? That when you are paying for 1 year your credit card, and let's say it was the 5 year purchase that you made for your phone,
Mm-hmm.
all of the money that you paid for 1 year is not going to your debt, to those $800 debt that you had, but it's actually going to pay only the interest rate. So
Right.
after 1 year of paying, you still may have more than 90% of that debt and you only
Mm-hmm.
pay interest for 1 year. So just do the homework, go and check on your bank statements and understand interest rate and how much have you paid in these last months for interest itself. Um, Third one in credit cards is, I just wanted to tell you what's the best way on how to use it. And the
Okay.
best way on how to use it is, if you're gonna buy, I don't know, let's say a chair for $100, before making the purchase,
Mm-hmm.
ideally you want to have the money on your bank.
Yes.
So you're going to use the credit card on your behalf. You already have the money, and you can use the credit card. The credit cards do have very, very good things that you can use on your behalf, and I want to get there. So it's getting having the money in your pocket, having the money in your bank. Once you make the purchase, let's say you made the purchase on the first day of the month, and your credit card cycle goes from the first to the last day of the month.
Mm-hmm.
And then when the date that you have to pay the credit card is the 15th of the next month.
Okay.
So let's use those dates as a references, and you make the purchase on the first day of the month. What does it mean? That you'll have 1 month
Mm-hmm.
and a half, because you don't have to pay until 45 days. For 45 days, you were able to use money that is not yours, because you have your money on your bank account working for you at a 10% of interest rate,
Mm-hmm.
while you use money of the bank for 45 days for free. Why for free? Because if you pay the full amount in 45 days, you are going to be able to pay with no interest at all. So most of the,
Oh, okay.
I'll say all of the accounts, all of the banks, again in Latam, in the Middle East, in Asia, will allow you to pay everything in the first payment in full with no interest rate.
Wonderful.
So if you have, let's say you were not able to have the $100 in your pocket, um, then you have 45 days to get those $100 and still have some earnings on your savings, on your investing account, and then use the credit card for free. Credit cards do offer rewards. So I don't know if you have seen that some of the credit
Yes.
cards usually promote that you can have points with certain
Mm-hmm.
locations, with certain um, establishments, supermarkets, um, gas stations,
Yes.
or even better, airlines. I,
Yes.
I, I I have mine with airlines, and that's the way I use it. So if I can use their money free for 45 days, no interest rate, and I able to receive and save miles with each one of the airlines, that's the best way to do it. But let's go to the worst case scenario, that you actually have to use it to pay something you have to pay. Just be wise. Don't spend your credit cards in lifestyle, in some things that you don't want to use, to defer to 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
And if you really have to do it, just try to pay it as soon as you can.
Mm-hmm.
Just make sure, um, and what I mean here is, when you pay in full, you have to be careful with the banks as well. If you actually, with some of the banks, if you actually want to pay everything in full, at the moment of paying, you need to specify that you're going to pay on the full payment. If you don't do so, and you specify that you want to pay in 1, 2, 3, or 4 years, even if you pay in full in the 45 days, you may be charged some interest. So you have to be careful. And whatever your bank is, just make sure you understand what the conditions are. Call your bank, tell them how does this work with them, so you're taking full advantage of this.
Okay, that's wonderful.
um what do you want, and avoid at all costs in credit cards, and is having a lot of credit cards. I have two credit cards. I have
Important too.
a Visa and a MasterCard, because Visa and MasterCard may have different promotions, discounts, rewards
Hmm.
that some locations do offer and others don't. So I want to take full advantage of those rewards. But it doesn't mean that I have my full credit used in both of them. So avoid at all costs having used all of the credit on your two credit cards, and asking for more loans, or using the credit of one card to pay the other one, or asking for loans to pay your credit cards. You're getting in
Yeah,
the worst case here. You're generating more interest and you're actually not paying your debt at all.
right.
So this closes the credit card part. Going back to more errors or mistakes that we want to avoid on the 30s, it's not having control over your budget or expenses. And
Important.
it's really simple here. If you don't know how much you're spending and
Hmm.
what are you spending your money in, you're just probably spending more money than your actual income.
Yes.
So you need to know how much do you currently need for each month, how much you're spending per month in different things. So sometimes we have um daily expenses that we're not aware and we don't
Right.
track. So let's say you go to the coffee shop every morning and you take a coffee, which can be $2. So $2 per day is not that much, but if you multiply those $2 for, let's say, 22 days that you go to the office, you're going to start to add up money that you're not probably being aware you're spending or
Yes.
tracking. And if additional to that cup of coffee you add a snack, which is an additional dollar, and then you do that in the morning and then in the afternoon and then at the night you go, I don't know, for a beer, that's money you're not being aware. And so the best advice here is you need to be aware of what your budget is, of how much you're spending and what you're spending your things at. um the other one, it's very related to this, and it's not allocating your income. So when
Okay.
we're not probably aware, there might be certain rules or advices or tips on how to do it. So let's talk about housing. So either you're paying rent or whether you're paying mortgage for your house,
Uh-huh.
the more the most known rule, it's 28. So it's the 28 rule. Just spend 28% of your income on housing, either on rent,
You're good.
either on mortgage. This includes probably taxes. This probably includes as well insurances that you have for your home. So it's a 28% for housing. It's probably a 20% for investing.
Hmm.
It might sound a lot, probably 20%. If you don't have debts, you can start with the 20%.
Hmm.
If you have a really tight budget and you're not spending 28% on housing, you can start with 5%, with 10%. Again, my best advice is to start investing today
Hmm.
as soon as you can. And then you have a remaining 52% to invest or probably to spend in your personal expenses, in if you have debts, if you have an entertainment actually. So you have a 52% remaining for other stuff. And what I want to reinforce here is prioritize always investing. That 20% we're talking about, don't leave investing at the end of allocating this budget. Because if you spend your housing first, if you spend your entertainment first, if you spend shopping and you have no money left at the end, then you will not have any savings. But if
Right.
you invest and separate the 20%, and you can actually automate this on the apps we were talking about. You can just program this for to be done on a monthly basis to get this amount of money out of your bank account and put it in the wallet. You're making this automatically already. So automate this. This is your priority. Don't leave it at the end. Then 28% for housing and 52% for the rest. I I don't know if we want to go to the end, or I think you might have a question about this.
For this specifically, I don't have any
Okay.
questions.
And the last one, probably for the 30s, it's not having insurances. And insurances are meant to be for those kind of situations that we don't expect to happen,
Mm-hmm.
but that if they happen, it might be very bad for our personal finances. And probably we can focus on three type of insurances here. The first one, it's for a vehicle. So if you have a car, if you have a motorcycle, just make sure you have an insurance
Right.
for it. If you have your house, make sure you have an insurance for your house. And let's talk about these two first. So let's say you were driving your motorcycle and you run into a store,
Right.
or with your house, that your house, we don't want it to happen, but it caught fire, and the fire itself could be extended to the apartments or houses right next to you.
Right.
In these two situations, you are actually responsible for the damages that happen to the store or to the other houses and apartments. So people can sue you for these damages that you're not
Yes.
expecting. So it's not only for covering your vehicle or your house itself, but it's
Mm-hmm.
also for you to be covered for these additional expenses that you're not expecting, and that are usually much more expensive
Mm-hmm.
than fixing your house or fixing your vehicle. So make sure you are covered against the
Mm-hmm.
situations that can be thousands and thousands of dollars that you're not expecting, that you don't have in your investings, that you don't have on your savings, that you don't have anywhere, and are gonna take you to a very bad situation.
True.
And the third one, it might be applicable for some of the countries, for some others don't, and it's medical insurance.
Right.
Um, let's put as an example the United States. United States, when you have a very high cost illness, there is a very specific data for United States, and it's there. I believe it's around 40% of the people in the states that file
Mm-hmm.
for bankruptcy. It's because they were going through a medical situation. So it was either because it was the medical expenses, or it was because they cannot work anymore in their
Right.
lives. So
Mm-hmm.
if this is a similar situation in your country, where the country or and the medical and the public health does not cover you for high cost illnesses, you want to be covered for this as well. So these are the five that we had for the 30s, and that might be applicable for the 20s, and that I hope that you start um, applying those today.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Stephen. And I take a lot of lessons from here, about the 28% for housing and prioritize investing, guys. That's a very important advice here, not just for your 30s, but like Stephen said, for your 20s as well. And the part of put your basic needs first, before you spend your money and then you end up with nothing or having to take out of your investing fund or your housing fund for those kind of things. So thank you so much for that advice, and I think it's going to be useful for everybody who's in their 30s and 20s.
For sure.
So after all of that wonderful advice, I still have more questions for you. So the next one is, how much should people really have in their emergency fund, and how can they build it up on a limited income?
Good. So it depends
Mm-hmm.
on that time of that moment of your life you're going through or you're living. So if you're in your 20s and it's your first job, or you're still in college,
Mm-hmm.
you can start working again on that emergency fund. You can aim for those 2 months we were talking about before. But if you're already working and living by yourself, you want to probably aim to have 3 or 4 months of those living expenses that you need. And nowadays, there's a lot of possibilities to work internationally. So
Right.
you don't have to have a contract within your country, but you can work as a contractor for other
Sure.
countries. And I think this is a very tough situation in regards of emergency fund, because you need to prepare better for these kind of situations. You would not have probably the same benefits that you have with the contract with the company.
Mm-hmm.
So if you get fired, or if you just end up your contract, you're not going to have those additional benefits companies can probably offer you with that direct contract.
Very
So
true.
if you work as a contractor, I'll say, or as a freelancer in your own country, you want to aim probably to have 5 to 6 months of that emergency fund.
Okay.
And when we're talking about emergency funds, let's say you're earning per month $1,000.
Hmm.
It's not that you want to get $1,000 per month, because remember that when you're working, you're actually spending a little bit more of money on different things. So you
Yes.
might be spending more money on transportation, on gas. You can be spending more money on work lunches, or on entertainment with the coworkers.
Yes.
So there are a lot of expenses that once you're not working, you're going to cut. So
Hmm.
when I talk about living expenses, it's just those essential expenses for you. So
Okay.
home utilities, so your groceries at home, so like internet, so like those specific things you need, you
Yes.
still need to pay when you are going to stop working.
Okay.
How to build that emergency fund on a short income, I think we have discussed about it on the past questions and give some ideas. And it's, again, start doing it today, start investing today,
Sure.
even if it's $1. And if you're saving the $1, just generate two wallets, two pockets, one for long-term investments and one for short-term investments, which can be the emergency fund.
Okay. That's wonderful. And that is part of preparing yourself for when you want to leave a job because you're not happy at it as well, right? And I have talked about this in my videos, guys. Like, if you want to leave your job because you're not feeling happy, because you're not feeling fulfilled, you're not growing, you can do it, but have a plan, just like Steven was saying, have an emergency fund for that specifically. Thank you so much, Steven, for that information.
Welcome, Liz.
As you can see, the conversation has been so interesting that it has gotten a bit late. So we had to turn on the lights. So that's what you see right now. And now we're going to continue with the questions. So my next question, Steven, is how do you recommend someone to start building a budget if they've never been tracking their spending before?
This is a really interesting question, Liz, and one of the most important parts and outcomes of today's session. And before you start building your budget, I
Mm-hmm.
want to leave another homework for today. So I want you to start working on awareness. Before building your budget, you need to be aware of, again, where your money is going to,
Mm-hmm.
of how much you're spending in which specific things. So how much you're spending on the coffees, how much you're spending on snacks, how much you're spending on shopping,
Mm-hmm.
on entertainment. So that's the homework for the next 1 or 2 weeks. Just try to be aware or where the money is going through. For example, for your housing, either if you're paying rent or mortgage, if you're complying with the 28%, to see
Yes.
if you can make an adjustment in the short, mid, or long term. And then the second part is to start building that budget itself. So for the first part, and later or right away, I'm going to share my screen and show you probably different ways of you can track those expenses. And then the second part is how we can build that budget. We can do it in a Google Sheet or Excel file, and how you can build it, track your income, which categories we can use, see what are the most common expenses. So let's just jump into it. I'll show you those apps that we can use, those tools that we can use, and how we can build that budget. So let me just share my screen. This is the other part that I wanted to show you. So if you prefer pen and paper, you can look for these notebooks on the internet or your local store. They're really good, they're really complete. You can track your monthly budget here, you can do the monthly expenses, you can track subscriptions, yearly payments, categories for your expenses, and the detail for each one of those expenses that you have. So this is a really other good option. Just look for it. And let's jump into the other file that I have. Give me just one moment. I'll switch to it right away. This is the file that I have created to track my expenses and where I created my budget. I'll go ahead and explain it really quickly. So column C, I just have the main categories and subcategories for my income, expenses, investments. Just use the ones that you use the most, and you can adjust whatever you need to adjust here.
Column D, it's due dates. That's the one that you use for my personal reminders. I put the date here for the due dates of the invoices of my payments so I don't go past due. I try to go over the file once a week and make sure I'm making all of the payments on time. Then we have on the monthly budget on column E, this is where I have created the budget. Just fill out the cells in white. The ones that are in the blue lines are calculated fields. At the end, what you want to achieve on here on balance, it's not to be in a negative balance. You want to be on a positive one. Otherwise, you'll want to review your income, if you can increase somehow your income or reduce and cut costs on your expenses. On column F for percentage, I'm tracking here two things. The percentage of your income you're using for investments. Remember, you want to aim for a 20%, but as soon as you start with something and 1%, 2%, it's fine. And also for housing, you want to be here at, remember, a max of 28%. It's currently showing as 16%, so we're good to go on this part. On type, just you can write down variable or fixed on each one of the expenses. This will help you to track variances on month over month, and it will give you some alerts with these color squares. So if you want to use them, go ahead and specify each one of the expenses, what type of expense it is. Let's jump into the monthly expenses or actual expenses. So what you want to do here is month over month, just write down the actual payment that you have done for each one of these categories and subcategories. I use here two type of colors or category of colors. The first one is for the categories itself. So I put here automatic payment, auto saving, and manual payment. And last one, it's manual payment. Automatic payment, somehow I have it automatic with my bank account, with my credit card or transfers. Auto saving is that I'm trying to save that amount of money on a monthly basis, but when I complete the quarter or the year, I'll need to go ahead and do the manual payment. And manual payment, the brown one, it's a manual payment always. And when I track here the payments, for example, those who are in retirement at $30 on green, I have these four colors. The first one, it's green. I did the payment and I'm done with it. Second one, blue, done to review. I did the payment, but I identify something changed, or I just want to review something for that payment or the next payment. So that's how I put the reminder for this payment for that kind of expense. The third one is error to process. So it had to be done, but something happened. The automatic process didn't function. So I need to follow up on this and make sure I process the payment as soon as possible. And the last one, not billed. I was expecting this to be billed, but it wasn't deducted. It wasn't paid. Probably it was a promotion, a discount, an error. So I just want to track that as well. And the changes month over month, you're going to have here the color squares. So if you have a blue one, it does mean that month over month didn't change. If it's an expense and it's on red, it means that it increased month over month. If it's green, it went down month over month. If it's an income or it's an investment, it's the other way around. It will go red if your investment decrease. It will go green if it increase. And when we were talking about here, if it's variable or fixed, when it's variable, it will only change colors when there's a variation of more than 10%. That's mainly the file. There's a lot of descriptions in here, categories, subcategories that you can use, adjust, just play around with the file, and we'll try to give you a hand with any questions that you have. Let's go back. I'll stop sharing my screen right now.
So we're going to share with you, or Liz is going to share with you the links and files that we used for this budgeting so you can have them available for you and start working on them right now.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Stephen, for giving us all of these wonderful explanations and these tools. And like he just said, you're going to have them available. So thank you so much for that. Okay, and now I have my last question, and to close with some advice for people as well. In your opinion, what are the financial habits that separate people who thrive from those who struggle? And like I said, some final words for our audience here.
Sure, Liz. So I think this is a great question to summarize what we have discussed today.
Mm-hmm.
And let's start with those habits that we don't want to replicate or continue in our daily lives. And again, it's just a summary of many of the topics we have discussed today. So, first one, it's please stop ignoring your spending. Let's work on that budget. Let's start working on that awareness on our where our money it's going, and that's the first one. Stop doing that. Stop ignoring your expenses and start working on that opposite habit. The second one, it's stop delaying again the investment. Stop delaying investing. You need to start doing it today. You need to start taking advantage of time. You need to start taking advantage of compound interest. The third one is stop being stuck in credit cards. Stop being stuck in high interest rate in loans.
Mm-hmm.
So just actually use them whenever you need them. So be wise on using those credit cards and loans. So if you actually need to pay for your college, um, just be wise on how to spend it. Do not use them for shopping. Do not use it for shopping, for luxury, for a lot of things today. The other one is stop not having an emergency plan and an emergency fund. So if you start doing the investing, you will have that emergency plan. And the last one that we probably haven't discussed in that depth is emotional spending. So it's again,
Oh.
it's probably a little bit of that social pressure.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of social pressure today because of social media, of
Right.
Instagram, of TikTok, of hey, you need to buy this is the trend today. So you need to put your own limits on that emotional spending,
Right.
on how much social pressure you will allow to have in your lives. The
Mm-hmm.
same example we were talking about, spending $800 on a phone. Do you actually need it? Can you spend a little bit less? Can you spend? Do you need a basic phone or do you need that latest version just to have to live to impress others?
Yeah.
And when we talk about emotional spending, it's also about stress. It's also about depression. It's about those things. So whenever we're sad, we tend to let's I don't know, let's go and have an ice cream, and that's
Mm-hmm.
good. I mean, when ice cream helps you because it allows the chemical reactions to your body to react and have some dopamine on your body and be
Mm-hmm.
happy.
Right.
But you should have some limits as well on that emotional spending, even if it's for stress, if it's for depression, and not create some bad routines around this.
Right.
And then the good habits are just probably the opposite, and just track your spending, track your expenses, and aim to live below your means. So again, that your expenses are lower than your income, using all of those tips that we have given today. But if you're using credit cards, if you're using loans, if you're paying for your house, for housing 50% of your income, you might be living on the limit of your budget and
Right.
you're living above your income and you're getting trapped into those credit card and high interest rates. Um, Start investing today. Start doing monthly investments and don't do it just once. It's a habit that you need to create. And again, for whenever you need to use credits or you need to use loans, use it wisely. You need to again do it just whenever you need to pay for college. You need for probably you need to buy a car because you really need it. If you can use public transportation, and or you're going to work with your car and it's something that you cannot pay in 1 or 2 months, just use it wisely. But it's not. Don't allow this to become your habit and the day to day. Keep learning. We already talked about it, so it's
Mm-hmm.
find for new sources of information and don't stop learning about personal finances. I think this is what summarizes all of our discussion today. I hope this really can help you, can help all of the people of our audience today on how to create good habits and how to change your life, because this is not just a conversation for today, but it will help you to thrive on your personal life and in your personal finances.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Stephen, for all of this advice and for the time spent here and the time spent, preparing all of this great information for all of our audience. So thank you so much again for being here. And thank you guys for watching. Thank you so much for listening. I hope that all of this advice helps, like Stephen said. And stay tuned for our next video because it will be as interesting as this one.